Hey, my name's Mike. Thanks for tuning in to the Daily Devo. Today, we're going to be talking about the most important thing that you and I should be doing in relationships. Hey, here on the Daily Devo, we're spending a couple weeks and we're talking about what does it look like to have better, happier, healthier relationships in our life. And today I want to read from the book of 1 Peter chapter 4. Peter's talking here. And in verse 8, he tells us one of the most important things that you and I can incorporate into the relationships we have. Here's what he says in verse 8. Most important of all, continue to show deep love for each other, for love covers a multitude of sins. And so as Peter unpacks this idea that you and I, we need to focus and emphasize love in our relationships, I want to ask you today, what does love look like in the relationships you have? Where does it sit? How important is it? You know, for us, love has a lot of different ways it comes out. I mean, love can mean something. I've been married for 14 years. I can say the phrase, I love you, and I can feel or think very little about it. Maybe it can even become empty or passive at times. Maybe for some of you, maybe love is more of an emotion you feel for someone. Maybe you just met someone or you're dating someone or there's somebody that you've been attracted to. There's this shallow emotion that sits inside of your body that says, hey, I really like this person. I really am fond of this person, or I really want to be friends with this person, right? Sometimes that emotional idea of love, it can kind of fade or dim when relationships get a little tough. That's not the love Peter's talking about here. This love sits more in the mental region than it does our emotional region. Peter's talking about what we know as agape love. And while we know one word for love, historically in scripture, the language would have had many different ways that the word love was expressed. And in this passage right here, this word would have been used called agape love. And this agape love, it's a love that sacrifices. One way you could say it is this. Agape love is a giving love. It's a love that seeks the good of the other person before the good of ourselves. It's the John 3:16, if you've heard this verse, which I'm sure you have, that God so loved the world that he gave his son Jesus. And Peter says this, he says the first thing we need to know is that our biggest priority in our relationships is to love in a sacrificial and a giving way. And so today, I don't know what that looks like for you. I don't know who in your life, maybe they've exhausted your emotional love. And maybe you're going to have to make a mental conscious decision to love them. But the first thing Peter tells us is learn to love with a sacrificial giving love. I love this. The second thing he says, love them deeply. Express deep love for these people. Don't just use love that's shallow, but use love that's deeply rooted in your life. It has this idea of an eagerness or a fervence to it, right? What's something in a relationship you have right now that's hard to love? What's something in a relationship you have right now that you go, man, I'm just exhausted by that person, or I'm exhausted by that thing? Here's what Peter would say. Peter would say, figure out a way to love that thing. It's like this. If there were layers and levels of how deep someone is loved in your life, Peter would encourage you and I to make sure that deep down in our relationships, we have cultivated a deep, sacrificial, giving love for those people around us. The last thing Peter tells us is he explains to us what it is that love does. He said that this deep love covers a multitude of sins. Man, that phrase has really just stumped me a little bit, right? Because there's so many ways that we can unpack that, but I actually believe that Peter learned something from the wisdom book of Proverbs in the Old Testament. Because Proverbs 10:12 says this, hatred stirs up dissension, but love covers over all wrongs. And so today I want to encourage you in something. Because the longer you're in relationships, the more chance you have to be hurt by people. The more you love people, the longer you give yourself away to people, the more opportunity there's for those people to expose their imperfect human nature and to bring sin and imperfection into the relationship you have. And this is Peter's advice for you and I. First, give a sacrificial love to those people around you. Learn to agape love. Learn to consciously, mentally decide to love those people. Second, love deeply. Cultivate and foster in your life a spirit that says, in spite of circumstances, I am going to choose love that's eager, that's fervent, that says, I will love you. And then third is this. Realize that love covers the issues and the problems of this world. That God has not called us to be judges first. That God has not called us to convict fast in the relationships we have, but God has called us to express His love for us through the way we love those around us. We hope you have a great day. Thanks for choosing to tune in to the Daily Devo.